Joining us from Washington is Mr. Peter Roff, the Newsweek contributing editor, and from Tokyo, Dr. Satoru Nagao, the fellow at the Hudson Institute. And welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me here today at Think Tank. And I will start with Mr. Peter. Sir, President Trump is embarking on a nearly week-long tour of Asia. What outcomes does he hope to achieve from his high-stakes diplomatic visit, do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing, and again, it's always good to be on Think Tank. I think the most important thing the president intends to bring back are trade deals. Everywhere that he's gone, particularly his successful trip to the Middle East prior to the Sharm el-Sheikh signing of the Gaza peace accord, he brought back hundreds of billions of dollars in investment commitments from American partners like Qatar and the UAE. Trump, there's a saying in politics: you have to hunt where the ducks are. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump likes to do business deals, and so he's going to the places where the ducks are, i.e., the investors. Yep. That's Malaysia. The Asian tigers are still roaring, and not only is that in the best interests of global economic growth and American economic growth, which we need very, very badly. But it also forms an economic perimeter that at least defends against Chinese expansionism, if not discourages it entirely.
And Dr. Satoru, how significant do you think is the peace accord signed between Cambodia and Thailand today for regional security, and how crucial was Trump's involvement in brokering it?
This is indeed very important, because ASEAN members now, from today, this is 11 countries gathered, integrate their effort. That's why ASEAN is valuable. But if Thailand and Cambodia fight each other, the people doubt the integrate effort of ASEAN. So ASEAN is not valuable if these members fight each other. So that's why in this case, the ceasefire of the ASEAN members is very important for how valuable ASEAN. And this year, host country is Malaysia. So that's why Malaysia tried to arrange this ceasefire. But in this case, President Trump's presence is very important. Firstly, his image is unpredictable. So that's why both Thailand and Cambodia worry about the attitude from the President Trump. That's why this is the power to push the negotiation to ceasefire. Mm-hmm. And secondly, because of the tariff negotiation, there's a high possibility that bad image, if they create, of course, the reaction is very bad, especially related with tariff. That is another matter, because ASEAN-US trade is still very important. Of course, China-ASEAN trade is bigger, but still the America-ASEAN trade is also very, very big for ASEAN. So that's why this is very important for the ASEAN countries. And view from the President Trump, this is very important too. View from the United States, ASEAN or Southeast region is just between the U.S. and China. So which side shows a more bigger presence is very important in the U.S.-China competition. So that's why if the President Trump arranges a ceasefire in this place, that means that the U.S. shows a strong presence in Southeast Asia than China. So that's why this visit and this ceasefire agreement between two countries is very important.
Okay. Mr. Peter, Trump presided over several deals on the first day of his Asia trip. To what extent do you think are these deals likely to have a lasting impact, or were they just primarily symbolic, do you think?
No, I don't think a Trump deal is ever primarily symbolic. Okay. It always, the symbolism does matter, though. It is important to remember
that you think they will have an impact.
No, I do think they'll have an impact. Not necessarily an immediate impact, but they'll have a long-term impact to promote economic growth, both in Asia and here in the United States. And again, with the national debt now at having surpassed $38 trillion, which is US GDP for 1 year plus a considerable amount of money. We have got to get jobs created, business expansion, increased international trade, and do things to get economic growth here up above 3, 4, 5%, so that we can have a strong recovery. We never had a strong recovery from the lockdowns. And we need that recovery to get our books in balance so that we can continue to lead the global economy. But as my colleague here on the panel was saying, the head of the South Korean Navy is now openly accusing China of violating international law in the Yellow Sea. This is a problem, and Donald Trump addresses problems like this with economics. The military is the last resort.
Okay.
He addresses it with strong economics, strong trade, so that everybody's got an incentive to defend themselves.
Dr. Satoru, how do you think this tour fits into Trump's broader Asia strategy? Can you tell us, is it more focused on trade, security, or political signaling, do you think?
Recently, security and economy is nearly integrated, so we cannot separate these two. For example, the economic security is very important matter. Why? Because even if the two countries want to trade, security rule related to security is very important. So under the rule of security, they can trade, but they cannot. Simply said, even if it's a cost-effective manner, they cannot trade with the enemy. So that is a limitation of the security in the case of business, in case of economy. So that is a new trend recently. So that's why security or economy in the both are important, but security is indeed very strong in this case, especially the US-China competition, and which side show more strong presence in the Indo-Pacific. Indeed, some presidents, they hesitate to come to the Indo-Pacific quite often. So that's why the regional country in the Indo-Pacific eagerly waiting the U.S. president's visit. And this time President Trump visit this region is a very important message from the United States to the region. The U.S. Does not forget Indo-Pacific, because China is a most serious competitor for the United States. Even if the recent U.S. move tried to ceasefire the trade war with China, in the long run, the coupling is ongoing, because when we check China's economy has failed to recover until now. So why? Because of the U.S.-China competition, many investors hesitate to invest to China. So that's why, indeed, the U.S.-China competition in the long-run process, this is escalating, no doubt. So, and that's why the U.S.-China competition is very important matter when U.S. president visits this region.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Peter, how important do you think it is for the region, if you can share with us and maybe elaborate more? The U.S. president is actively attending the ASEAN Summit. How important is this? And is this seen as a genuine commitment or merely a stop en route to his meeting with Xi Jinping?
Oh, I absolutely think this is a definite commitment. And I have to say that I agree with much of what Satoru-san had to say about particularly the U.S. position towards China. Yeah. The president is meeting with China's competitors first, his regional competitors. Remember that among these countries are alternative locations for American manufacturing, for the assembly of goods that will be sold in the United States. Yeah. After our experience with COVID, with our supply chain issues, there was tremendous political pressure in the United States to move manufacturing and assembly efforts out of China. Where do they move to? Well, if they don't move back to the United States, or they don't move to Mexico or Canada, they move to Vietnam, they move to the Philippines, they move to South Korea, Japan, Thailand, all bordering China. These are intricately important relationships
Yep.
for the survival of the American
Yes.
economy.
As
And
an
so I
alternative.
absolutely believe that this is a definite commitment because here Trump sees an opportunity for U.S. business to expand.
Dr. Satoru, Japan's new prime minister is meeting President Trump. What is Japan's, if you can tell us, most critical priority to secure in that bilateral meeting?
Of course, Japan is a frontline country to face the threat of China. So that's why this is a priority, especially the Prime Minister Takaichi, focusing on security issue very much. So she will modify the national security strategy of Japan, and she will establish a new intelligence service in the government. And so these are the move. Of course, mainly Japan tried to show the effort. But at the same time, recently President Trump and the U.S. government asked the U.S. allies to share more security burden, especially the rising the defense budget from the 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP is a common request from the United States. And in case of Japan, Japan cannot find so much money originally, but under the new Prime Minister Takaichi, she tried to increase, she have already expressed. So that's why this will be a very big issue between US and Japan. And Japan will show the very strong effort, big effort to adjust this request from the United States and share the burden because Japan is located in the region and the U.S. need to deal with many security issues in the world. This means that regional allies should share the security burden is understandable. So that's why Japan must do something. That is current new Prime Minister's Japanese government are thinking. Thank you.
And Mr. Peter, how significant is the Cambodia-Thailand ceasefire pact? Can you tell us for the ASEAN, for the Southeast Asian stability? And does the U.S. intend to use trade incentives as a model, do you think, for future peace deals?
I think the security agreement is significant because peace around the rim of China is important for the conversation about relocating U.S. Western manufacturing and assembly activities from China to the rim countries. China is facing a demographic tipping point, much like the Americans faced when the baby boomers began to retire, fewer workers supporting more retirees. Xi Jinping knows that he has a demographic crisis coming. He cannot afford to have those jobs go to Vietnam, go to Thailand, go to the Philippines, go to South Korea. He just cannot afford that. His books won't balance if they do. And so that is an additional lever that President Trump has to squeeze him in trade conversations. Again, Donald Trump believes in using trade relationships, in using economics as a weapon. I also want to say it is my hope that the new Japanese prime minister, who has been described in the American press as a Japanese Margaret Thatcher, will pursue a Thatcher-like agenda of greater privatization, of breaking the ties between the Japanese government and Japanese business so that the Japanese economy can also begin to grow and present an additional set of pressures on China that will force China to be more accommodating in its trade relationships and deter its aggressive behavior, both militarily and in technology, in the technology arena. The Chinese threat to establish secondary and tertiary use restrictions on any rare earth materials that are manufactured in the United States, but from materials mined and refined in China is not something the U.S. can say yes to. And while there are companies here in the United States like United Rare Earth in Tennessee that are developing U.S. refining facilities and working with the national labs to develop a robust rare earth minerals industry here, and they will do it. In the interim, we have to say no to Chinese restrictions. It would be too difficult for the US to move through the AI economy with those kinds of restrictions, not to mention the national security implications. So everything that President Trump does to strengthen our relationship with the ASEAN nations, everything that he does that puts China in a difficult position regarding its demographic tipping point and its ability to control the resources like rare earth metals that it wants to sell in the global marketplace is a plus for the rest of the world.
Yeah. I'm back again to Dr. Satoru. Looking ahead and maybe looking a bit for the future, what do you think, in your opinion, and if you can share that with us, do you think are the ideal outcomes of Trump's meetings in Japan and South Korea for Southeast Asia?
View from Japan, Japan focusing on personal relation between President Trump and Prime Minister Takaichi. Because it is true that Prime Minister Takaichi tried to be Japan's Margaret Thatcher. But at the same time, she is also the successor of the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, because he pointed her out the successor of him in the past. So that's why she want to be the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was a very good friend of President Trump, and President Trump, even if they recently clearly mentioned the Prime Minister Abe's name repeatedly. So that's why the Prime Minister Takaichi want to be such kind of the close friend of the President Trump. It will affect later, she believes. And indeed, in Japanese government, everyone wished this, so indeed. So that's why this is one of the things. But in case of this, indeed, the South Korea president faced more tough situation because the President Trump believes he is right and South Korea's president is left. And more pro-North Korea or pro-China, he believes. So that's why personal relation between U.S. and the South Korean leaders is a little bit simply not good situation. Many media report indicated that. So that's why in case of Japan tried to be the good friend, but in case of South Korea, they also want to be the good, creating the good relation with President Trump. That is their interest in this trip, I think.
Mr. Peter, the U.S. and Chinese trade negotiators in Malaysia have agreed on a framework ahead of Trump's meeting with Xi. How significant is this development for the U.S.-China trade relationship? If you can share that with us, please.
I'd be more surprised if they hadn't agreed on a framework. The pressure from the United States on China regarding tariffs is considerable. The pressure from China on the United States is also considerable. There are real issues to be scheduled, and I would be surprised if they had not mapped them out in advance. What the outcome of those discussions is going to be, I don't know. I hope that President Trump will bring home what I'm sure he would describe as a good deal for the United States. It is important not only for global economic growth, but it is important to keep China in the box. China under Xi Jinping is being economically and militarily adventurous, expansionist. They are stretching the boundaries, if you will, to what they argue is their rightful place in the world. But I think the rest of the world would argue takes away from other countries and is destabilizing. That has to stop because it is not in the best interests of the ASEAN nations. It is not in the best interest of the United States. It is not in the best interest of the world for military tensions between China and the United States and the rest of the world to rise.
Dr. Satoru, China says basic consensus reached in trade talks with the U.S. Based on this, what outcomes does Xi Jinping expect to achieve from his upcoming meeting with Trump?
In this case, in the long run, U.S. and China will not back down their claims, so that's why competition will continue. But temporarily, they try to deal to one kind of the ceasefire to postpone the battle. In this case, indeed, China has some advantage in the temporary, even if the long run, U.S. has advantage, because they have already dominated the supply of rare earths. 90% of the refined rare earths came from China, so without China's support, no country can produce the cars or high-tech weapons, this one. In case of the United States, even if the U.S. want to strengthen their military assets, the U.S. weapon use, 30% of the parts the U.S. weapon use is made in China. So that's why these parts use rare earths came from China. And so that's why to deal with China, to fight with China, that they need to cooperate with China. This is ironical situation. So that's why temporarily the United States need to continue trade with China. And in the long run, they will decouple, but not just now. It's the situation. So that's why they try to negotiate. Of course, China want to get some from the United States, and the U.S. want to get some from China. That could happen in this trip. Thank you.
Mr. Peter, when asked if the two countries could extend the trade truce, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said yes, but emphasized that the final decision rests with Trump. Given Trump's confidence ahead of his meeting with Xi, is this an extension likely?
If Scott Bessent, who is perhaps the most able member of the president's cabinet, says that it is, I believe it.
Okay.
They have the Chinese, as I've tried to explain, the Chinese have an incentive to give Trump what he wants. They may think they're in the catbird seat right now, but the president can build on what he does at the ASEAN meeting to make things very difficult for Xi Jinping in a very short time. It wouldn't take a lot of presidential support for well-known brand name companies that assemble their products in China, that manufacture their products in China, to take them to Vietnam, to take them to the Philippines, to take them to Thailand.
Another alternative.
Yes, and Xi Jinping knows this. And Donald Trump knows that he knows this. And Donald Trump is very good at negotiating.
And that was Mr. Peter Roff, the Newsweek contributing editor, and Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow at the Hudson Institute. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your invaluable sights and analysis, and for being here with me today at Think Tank.